Well, a little bit of progress with the float lock vise. This is the end spacer, which goes on the end of the two rods here. Mr. Peat wasn't wrong when he said there was an awful lot of work in making this very small part. It did take quite a while to make that. I've still got to drill a hole through here so I can pin it to the sliding bar. And we made a start on the handle. This will be the crank handle. This was considerably easy compared to the spacer. So yeah, it's coming along slowly but surely. Well, this is the setup I've come up with for machining the flats on the end of the handle. I've got the machine handle held in 5/8 collet in this collet block here, which is clamped onto the angle plate. And I've got my milling cutter, obviously, in the chuck. And it's not ideal, but it seems to be doing a reasonably good job. I've got very little clearance here on the bed of the lathe, so I've got to be fairly careful. But yeah, we're getting there. It seems to be doing the trick. Again, you have to take small cuts with this. You can't take large cuts, and obviously because the work isn't held as tightly as you might want it to be, you do get a little bit of chatter, but you get the idea. Yeah, and then we'll do the same thing in the opposite direction. But yeah, you get the idea. And of course, because the collet block is hexagonal, once I've got to my 3/16 depth of cut on here, I can simply make a note of the height, so I can put this back in exactly the same place, turn it through 180 degrees, and mill the other side. So that's my solution for that part of it. Right, progress with the float lock vise. The handle is now complete. I mean, it still needs to have the hole drilled in this face here, but other than that, it is complete, and it's turned out, I'm very pleased, turned out very nicely. Basically, I did after machining the flats on here in the lathe, I did exactly what Mr. Peat did, was I basically marked this out and then used the belt sander to create that radius. Yeah, it's turned out okay. The bend, now to do the bend, I've recently invested in a piece of kit that my friend Rob, who runs the Zenudo YouTube channel, has advocated, and that is one of these mateys. Now this is a Bullfinch propane gas torch. And these aren't cheap, but they are an excellent bit of kit. So thanks for the tip, Rob. This is a really, really good bit of kit, and it was more than adequate to provide the heat required to get this to red hot, so I could bend it in the vise exactly the same way Mr. Peat does in his videos. Okay, so the next stage is to produce the pit that the handle, this is 5/8 bar stock again, that the handle attaches to. So again, Mr. Peat, he made a tool to do the 5/16 radius on the end of the bar stock. What I did was I've got several radius milling cutters, one of which the 5/16 one is in this Toolpost adapter block that I've done videos on these adapter blocks in the past. So I simply used that to cut the radius. This went in the chuck, and then that just cuts the radius almost exactly the same as Mr. Peat does, but of course I'm using a milling cutter rather than a specifically made tool. I'm also had a bit of luck here, because this is one of my other tool post adapter blocks. And again, I've shown these on videos on my channel. And this one is designed to take different sizes milling cutters as well. But fortunately for me, the bit of stock that I need to machine next fits in there quite nicely. So the plan is now to mount that in there, and then I shall put a 1/4 inch end mill in the lathe and cut the slot using the top slide. So that was a don't often get bits of luck like that, but that worked out quite well. So that's the next job, is to machine the slot in there, cut this to length, drill the hole so that it fits over the end of the threaded rod, and then drill the 2 cross holes, the one for the pivot on the handle and the one that secures this to the threaded rod. So that's the next operation that we'll be doing. Okay, so here's the setup for milling the slot. Milling the slot. Well, technically we are milling, but we're doing it on a lathe. So there's a bit of 5/8 stop with the 5/16 radius end, 1/4 inch milling cutter, collet chuck in the lathe, and I'm going to use this opportunity to debut a brand new workshop tool, which is a recent acquisition, and that is the Decimo Vatman calculator. I've been needing a bloody calculator for the workshop, and I finally decided to get one, and I thought, well, I really like the old vacuum fluorescent displays, and this is a 1970s, and it doesn't matter, it didn't cost hardly anything at all, so if it gets mucked up it doesn't really matter. But we're going to use this to calculate the cutting speed, well, the RPM anyway, using the standard formula. So it's 4 times the cutting speed for steel, which is in surface feet per minute, which is 100, so that's 400, divided by the tool diameter, which in this case is 1/4 inch, 0.25, gives us a cutting RPM of 1600. Well, we are not going to be going quite that fast, because the lathes in the gearing it's in at the moment will only do 1250 flat out. So, but that'll be more than adequate for our purposes here. So, putting our safety glasses on, we will put some gloop on it, and carriage is locked. Spin it up, flat out. I'm going to go across and touch off. Right. And again, we'll make small cuts to start with. I'm very lucky here. This is a brand new 1/4 inch end mill, so it's going to cut nicely, obviously. And basically that's it. That's what I shall be doing, and that will cut us hopefully a nice 1/4 inch slot in the middle of the radius end. Okay, this will be the last pass. We're at the right depth now, or we will be after this. And that is the slot all cut. Ready for the handle. Well, the vice part of the float lock vice is finished as far as I can go. Turned out quite well, quite pleased with it. The one operation I couldn't work out a way of doing, simply because I didn't have enough travel on my lathe to do it, is to machine the step in the tops of the jaws. I'm not too bothered about that. It's not absolutely crucial. You don't definitely need that, though it would have been nice to have it. But other than that, I managed to do everything else. Yeah, it's all working. Let's come back a bit so you can see that. The little handle works nicely. it's all free and it all winds up and down quite nicely. And the handle, you can obviously the handle is designed to pivot, so you can move it out the way, so forth. Yeah, it's I'm quite pleased. So far, it wasn't too difficult either without the mill. Although obviously that would have been nice. But I do have a confession to make. I did actually cock up one bit of it. That is the second one of these that I've had to make. It was all my own fault. When I centre punched this hole for drilling here, I hadn't centre punched it deep enough, and I didn't realise as I was drilling it on the drill press that the drill wandered off the centre pop. So this hole was drilled off centre. I wasn't too bothered about this because this part is actually quite easy to make. But what did concern me was obviously now I had an off centre hole in the handle. I didn't really want to go and make another handle. However, I was lucky enough with the handle. I made a mild steel pin up, which was slightly bigger than the hole I drilled, heated the handle up and hammered the pin in to fill the hole, and then filed it all off flat and re-drilled the hole in the centre, so that when I made the second one of these, it all lined up nice and straight. I will say something about the drilling of the holes here. Mr. Pete used the various setups on his drill press to drill these holes, but if, like me, you've got a cross-drilling attachment for your lathe, then it's much easier and far more accurate to drill round bar stock on the lathe using the cross-drilling attachment. So unlike Mr. Pete, I had this one for both of these holes. I cross-drilled these in the lathe, it all lined up absolutely perfectly. And obviously you can take the threaded rod out and stick that in a collet, put this on, and then drill through both at the same time. And you can pop the jaw on so you know exactly, you put a bit of shim, as Mr. Pete says in his video, put a bit of shim between here and this collar so that it's this not tight up against that, and then you can drill the hole and it all lines up perfectly. So yeah, I would advocate using, if you've got one, use a cross-drilling attachment to do these holes for the roll pins that hold all that in place. But yes, it's all turned out very nice indeed. I will also, word of caution, when heating this up to bend it, the handle, it's very easy when you're tapping this with a hammer to get the 90-degree bend that it also moves that way or that way. So eye it up before you take the heat off to make sure that it is vertical. But no, I'm pleased with it. It came out quite well, and as I said, I love Mr. Pete's videos. They're just so easy to follow, and he's absolutely brilliant at explaining what he's doing. I'll put links in the description to all of the little videos I do on the float lock vise, to all of his videos, and I thoroughly recommend you go and watch those. So the next stage is to make the clamp for the slide rod to actually clamp it down to the table of the drill press.